Un aplaudiment per l'Amal El-Mohtar, no?
Round of applause for Amal El-Mohtar, right? Good afternoon and welcome. This panel will be in English, so if you do not speak English, just rush outside and get a headset.
This woman is Amal El-Mohtar.
That's me.
Finally, I get to meet her. She was born in Ottawa in 1984. She writes poetry, fiction, and also criticism. She has won the Hugo, the Nebula, the Locus, with short stories, and she became worldwide known with This Is How You Lose the Time War, which is a great, great short novel.
Thank you.
With Max Gladstone. It was a weird thing what happened with this novel. We'll talk about it later.
Yes, yeah.
It received the British Science Fiction Association award and the Aurora, and you have also written translation. I mean, you've done pretty much everything around literature. And now you have here your new novel in Spanish. Well, actually not novel, novelas, because it's two. In Spanish, it's only one. In Catalan, it's a double edition with the two novelas, which is The River Has Roots. Everywhere it says it's your solo debut novel,
yes.
Which is tricky because it's not a novel, it's a novella. And also, it's like, and now she's standalone, she's alone. And like, the Time War was something easy.
Yes.
So I want to do something I rarely do. Normally, I don't give a fuck about the life of the author.
Okay.
I mean, this is not the 19th century. The text should stand alone.
Sure.
But in your case, it's a bit tricky and interesting because I said you were born in Ottawa, you're Canadian, but I know that when you were around 6, you went for a couple of years to Lebanon.
Yes.
And I know that your whole literary career was marked there. So I would like you to tell us a little bit about this, this thing in Lebanon.
For sure. So I lived in, so my parents are both from Lebanon, and they met in Canada. And we moved to Lebanon in 1991 for a couple of years. And so I turned 7 while I was there. And I should say, in my mind, that was like a continuous 2 years. But I have been informed that we were coming back to Canada for the summers and stuff like that. But I had my school years basically in Beirut, and when I think about a lot of the things that are foundational to who I am in the world and to the things that all of my interests, it's strange to realize how many of them started in Lebanon. So. There are a few. I read The Hobbit for the first time in Lebanon, and it became my favorite book, and it was very important to me. And in the edition of The Hobbit that I had, there was either a biographical note or a note from Tolkien that said something like he started writing poetry and then short stories and then novels. And I just remember thinking, oh, I guess that's how you become a writer. You start writing a very short thing, and then you write a slightly longer thing, and then a slightly longer thing. And that has been very consistent for me, I think. I haven't yet written a novel, but I have to. So here's hoping I figure out how to do that soon. But I was also introduced to science fiction in Lebanon. The same cousin who gave me The Hobbit to read also gave me novelizations of Doctor Who. And I didn't know that they were novelizations of a TV show. I just thought they were books. So I loved them, and I read through a whole bunch of them of Terrence Dicks's books that had John Pertwee on the cover and stuff. And fully up until 2002, I didn't know that it was a television show, and so when they rebooted it, I was very excited, and I was telling all my friends, they're making my childhood books into a TV show. This is so exciting. So So there was that, but there was also the fact that I feel like Lebanon is also where I figured out how to do research, because we had a neighbor, we had a Palestinian neighbor whose name was Madame Beiruti, which is a thing that happens in Lebanon. Like if someone will be named like Al-Masri, meaning like the Egyptian, but like they've been living in Lebanon for 600 years, but initially someone came from, anyway, so Madame Beiruti, who is Palestinian, was down the hallway from us in our apartment building, and she would just like leave the door open so that like my sister and I could wander back and forth, and she had a complete set of the Encyclopedia Britannica, and I don't know how I pulled like the M volume off the shelf, but I happened upon the entry for mythology. And in the entry for mythology, there were a lot of like names of different mythological and folkloric characters and stuff. And I was like, great, so I kept that open. And then because they were in alphabetical order, I just started pulling like the A book off the shelf and reading about Alcestis. And then like just kind of proceeded through that and acquired like a pretty robust education in Greek and Roman mythology mostly because of this. And she would just let me sit there on the floor of her apartment and read these books. And it was really lovely. So there was, all of that was there. I also wrote my first poem in Lebanon. And it was a poem to the moon that I still remember to my chagrin. And I don't know, I'm weirdly proud of it. But anyways. But I remember like speaking this poem or reading this poem to my parents, and instead of like just going, oh, that's really good, they got very solemn, and they said, you know, your grandfather was a poet, and they didn't quite give me the full story at that point, but my grandfather, who had been a revolutionary, imprisoned for his politics, for wanting to have secular government in Lebanon, for most of like my father's childhood, was also a poet. And the way that my parents talked to me about this, they made it clear that to be a poet was a responsibility, that was something very important. And that if I was going to be a poet, I had to recognize this and understand this. And that a poet was someone who spoke truth to power and spoke for people who couldn't speak. And that really stayed with me. It was like, you know, being 7 years old is a very good time to be given a kind of mantle of responsibility, you know, to be given a quest in life. So I was like, okay, this is great. I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to start with poetry, like Tolkien, and I'm going to progress through other kinds of writing. But this is what I'm going to be in life. And my parents never made me think that this was an unwise career choice or anything like that. They were always very, very supportive of this. And I always felt really grateful for that. So yeah, so it was the 2 years that I lived in Lebanon have such a disproportionate share of my memories from being that age as a child, and everything that I remember from Lebanon is very vivid and just like very much at the heart of me.
Your first poem about the moon, you said you wanted to apostrophe the moon.
What have you been reading? How do you know this?
Because I've done my fucking
Oh my
job.
God, this is incredible. Okay.
I told you I'm a big fan.
Thank you. Yeah.
I think that you are still a poet even when you write prose.
Yeah.
Language is central to your stories, which doesn't mean it's central to the plot. Mm-hmm. It's not the same. But for example, reading the Time War, I mean, it was amazing what you did with the language, because it's an epistolar story. There are 2 characters, 2 narrators, and 2 authors. Mm-hmm. So when you start to read it, you say, okay, that's easy. Every author writes one, and in the end you put it together, and that's stuff.
Yeah.
But no, because you see, there's this quixotization of scent. They start to blend together.
Yeah.
In the end, you have one only style, one voice. Mm-hmm. for one author, this is really difficult to do. But how do you manage to do it with when you have to write on four hands?
This is such an amazing question. And the thing is that this was something that Max and I noticed was happening, but we weren't doing it deliberately. It's the same way I think that I find whenever I'm speaking with someone with a different accent, my accent starts to mimic theirs, and it's not something but I cannot do an accent to save my life. I would not try. But if I'm in Scotland and I'm speaking to my Glaswegian family members, I can hear the cadence of my voice change. Even if I'm speaking about Glasgow, I can hear the cadence of my voice change. But I can't do it on purpose. And I think that was what was happening with Max and me, was that when we were writing the most of Time War, we wrote over a period of 9 days. We were at a writing retreat together. We were sitting in a gazebo with no internet across a table from each other. And one of us would write the letter, and the other would write the situation in which the letter was being received. And we would discuss between us the situation, but we never discussed the letters. And that way the letters were always a surprise, both to the person receiving it and the person writing it. We were just figuring it out as we were going along. And as we started the process, we figured out very quickly that Max writes almost exactly 4 times as fast as I do, which I could hear very clearly because he had a keyboard with a lot of travel. So it just sounded like when he was writing. And then for me, I was like, just very slowly piecing together what I was doing. And so the first act or so of the book, he would have to wait for me. He would write 4 times as much as me and then wait for me to finish my part. And then we would swap and so on. But as the book went on, he slowed down and I sped up, so that we started finishing at exactly the same time in a way that was eerie. It was just like our brains were melding. And it kept surprising us. We kept looking up going, really? Are you done? Oh my God, okay. And swapping the laptops, reading what we'd written, and then swapping them back and being delighted and excited about it. And that experience is so singular and so extraordinary. It's still the most beautiful writing experience I've ever had. And just realizing that this was happening, that we were bending towards each other, and that we were learning from each other. And I think it was all coming from the fact that we really wanted to impress each other. This was in the first flush of our friendship, and we were both kind of trying to draw ourselves up to our full height and be like, look what I can do. And then receiving that and seeing it as a gift, and also as a prompt and as an invitation. I think that created the conditions for the voices to blend and mix together. And when we saw it happening, it was just wow, the form is following the function. This is what we want to have happen in the story, and we're seeing it happen on the layer of the craft. And it still kind of dazzles me that it did. And I'm so happy that it did. So yeah.
And now in River, I'm going to call it just the River because
sure.
Just for sure. In the River, I got the clear sensation that you are playing with words, with the sounds, their etymology, which is, now that you mentioned Tolkien, now it's very Tolkien-y.
Yeah.
The characters in Rivers, they seem to have the same relations as the places, like familiar relations, for example. Do you really care that much about etymology and the linguistic background of words?
I really do, yeah, as much as I know it. I am not a trained linguist or philologist, but I am an avid collector of facts about language. And I taught creative writing and just English literature for a few years in university. And I remember, I actually can't remember exactly when I was introduced to the fact that the word grammar comes from grammary, and that it had these associations with magic. But after I learned it, it was a very useful fact to share with bored undergraduates who had to learn grammar and who hadn't been taught it in high school and stuff. And if I could offer it to them as something that was not just a set of rules they had to learn, but instead as like a provocation towards curiosity, to say, did you know that the word grammar used to mean magic? Like, that this thing that we use to structure our speech to each other was seen as so powerful that, you know, that it had all this magic resonance. And I think that that makes people sit up and pay attention. It definitely did with me, because I had been drilled in grammar, in French grammar, because I went to school in Quebec. And students, like Anglophone students, don't get taught grammar the way that you do in a French school, where you have to learn verb forms, and you've got your Becherel, and you've got like all of these other things. And so I feel like that helped me understand what was happening with English a lot, to just have a structure in my head that could help with that. But the possibilities of language and the things that you can do with it, that playfulness and so on, I think I just love noticing that. I love anything that defamiliarizes language. And in particular, I kind of get this from the other side with Arabic, where, Arabic was my first language, but it was overtaken by English and French pretty quickly, so it's now the language that I speak the least fluently, and that I read and write it at like a 5th grade level. Excuse me, I'm just going to take a sip of water because I keep clearing my throat. So I speak Arabic fluently, but at a child's level, and that means that like Arabic is the language of home for me, but not a language that I communicate in so regularly that I take it for granted. So often it happens that I notice something in Arabic that I bring up to my dad, and I'll say like, does this word mean the same thing as this other word? Like, and he will be surprised, and he'll be like, oh, you know what, I guess it does, and not have noticed that. So I feel like having a little bit of distance from the language allows you a perspective on it that can allow for different possibilities. An example from Arabic that I love to share is that the word for street is shari'a, but it's the same word for argument. Like, I'm shari'a someone. Like, you can argue with someone. So you could say to someone, like, if you want to say, don't argue with me, you're literally saying, don't street to me. And I just think that's delightful, you know? So those moments, like, in the book, at least in English, whenever there's a word that has one meaning, but another meaning kind of tucked inside it, whether it's an opposite meaning or just like a slant meaning, I see that as like I associate that with Arcadia and with fairy. So these two willow trees are called the professors. And in English, professor means teacher. But it's also one who professes. And most commonly in English, when you use the word profess, you're talking about love. So the professors are actually two people who professed their love to each other. And the idea that that can be hidden inside the designation of teacher means that on the one hand, these trees are teaching you to love. You know what I mean? Like, and or the fact that the refrain is the word for the entrance to fairy. And a refrain is the part of a song that repeats, but it's also the word to tell someone to stop. So there's kind of both an invitation in there, but also an injunction to stop. And I really like that. So I just love finding those moments.
It's funny that you say that your first language is the one you are less fluent in, because I don't know if you've noticed, but your characters have very hard moments with communicating. Mm-hmm. Red and Blue, for example, they literally cannot speak with each other, yeah. And they have to look for ways to do it. But Esther, she literally loses her ability to speak when mm-hmm. she's transformed. What does to be able to speak mean to you?
Oh my gosh, wow. That is such a beautiful question, and I want you to know that I feel it in my heart as I am staring at this pillar and trying to think about how to answer it. It is so important to me to speak. I'm going to get a little emotional as I say this for a number of reasons. And I'm going to try to answer by way of an anecdote. I don't know if you've noticed this about me yet. We have met very recently and have spoken very briefly. I am a very gregarious extrovert. I love to talk very much. I get a lot of energy from conversation and from speech. And the only time I've ever doubted this was a moment where I was on a mini tour with my friends CSC Cooney and Caitlin Paxson, who make up this trio with me called the Banjo Apocalypse Crinoline Troubadours. We have this little performance collective that we have done nothing with for many years, but for a brief time we wrote like little songs together and performed them. And so we had done this little mini tour. I was not taking very good care of my voice, and the last performance that we did was at this convention in Boston called ReaderCon. And I just I was very croaky and basically had lost my voice. And but it was fine, you know. It was going to come back. I was going to get through it. But I found myself surrounded by my friends and just feeling exhausted in a way that I don't normally feel when I'm around people. And I just felt like I wanted to shrink back and hide, and I felt weirdly sad. And I found myself talking to my then fiance, now husband, saying I'm so confused by this. I know stuff is going on, and I really want to be hanging out with people, but I just feel like I need to hide, and I just maybe I've misunderstood my whole life. Maybe I'm actually a secret introvert. Maybe I've exhausted my social battery, a thing that has never been possible before this moment. I don't get what's happening. And he just very calmly said, "Okay, but you literally just told me that you can't talk right now. Do you not think that maybe that's the problem? Are you maybe depressed because you want to talk and you can't because you've lost your voice?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I guess that is what happened." so it's just on a very simple wiring level, speaking is important to me. It is how I feel like I connect with people and find community. But the other way in which it's very important to me, and the part that makes me emotional, is that for when I feel like I can't speak, or I have to watch what I say, or I have to mitigate my speech, I feel this I want to say rage, but it's not quite right. I feel this this misery. There's this infuriated misery of something that is being stopped. I've had an essay that I've had half written in drafts for 2 years now. That's titled "The Recovery of Speech," and it actually is relevant to this in as much as I wrote it before River Has Roots had come out, and I was reflecting on certain uses of language that I make in there because I was trying to talk about Palestine, and I was trying to figure out how to say certain things about Palestine on the internet when no one was talking about it. And the cost of trying to figure out how to thread the needle of other people's ignorance and bigotry in order to try and make them understand something so simple and crucial was infuriating and exhausting and devastating. And I think now that I have said this, and this feels like a therapy session, I'm sure it goes back to being a child and learning that when you're a poet, speaking truth to power is important. And anything that feels like I am sidestepping or abdicating that responsibility out of deference to someone else's comfort feels like an outrage. It just feels like, and that's like another injustice, like another way of like slowly killing a person, and I hate it. So I have been thinking a lot recently about the things that feel silencing, and the ways in like what to do about that. And in my case, what I have done about that has usually been to stew over it for a long period of time and then write something about it. As part of why the acknowledgements to The River Has Roots are the way that they are, where I talk very frankly about Palestine and Lebanon. And the connection between this book and my childhood, very literally. Like there is an episode in the book that's just wholly lifted from my childhood. And it's so it just feels like, even though I write very little that is directly about the Middle East in my fiction, it's always there. It's always underneath, and it's always kind of making the material of what I have there, because I'm always writing about people who are between languages and between countries and between inheritances and burdened with a great responsibility on some level. And I know that I do this a lot because I recently had to collect a lot of short stories together into a collection. So I got to be like, wow, I do just write about the same thing over and over again. But usually through the medium of two women talking to each other. So it just keeps happening. But yeah.
One recurrent theme in your text, and I think it's especially evident especially clear in River, is the contrast between what society tells us that it's important and what we as individuals feel that is truly important.
Yeah.
And when I was listening to you talk about Palestine and about using your voice to talk about it when everybody was saying like, well, whatever. I mean, like, for example, friendship, or art, if you want. What do you think that we accept to live this schizophrenic discourse when we live our lives mostly through friendship and through the arts, but then when we consume novels and films, they seem to be something accessory, not the main thing?
That's a really, really good question. I think there's a degree to which the media that we consume a lot of the time is sort of designed to not look like our day-to-day life, right? And I understand why. It's the same way that, like, you don't trying to use a useful metaphor, and all I have are bad ones, but like I think that most of the time when we make art that is narrative, I think that we are reaching for an intensity that is in contrast to the intensity of our day-to-day life, right? This is the example I'll use. We speak more than we sing. And I think that a lot of the stories that we tell are like the drama, the adventure, the excitement is more in a sung register. It's like in a musical. The moments where people burst into song are moments of enormous emotional intensity and stuff. But we mostly don't live our lives in song. We mostly live our lives in speech. So I think that there is something to that in terms of the disparity between how much friendship gets represented in media, because so much of media is organized around tension and
conflict.
Sorry?
Conflict.
Conflict. That's what I was looking for conflict. And those are absolutely present in friendship. I have 100% experienced more conflict and tension in some of my very deep formative friendships than I have in my marriage, which is, mostly credit to my wonderful partner who is here somewhere. But anyways, but all this to say that I do think that we lose something, though, when we don't consider it as, we don't consider friendship as something that can be as richly textured and as full of tension and conflict and so many things as, for instance, romance, as, for instance, I don't know, violence, for that matter, any genres of thing. And so there's a degree of just wanting to write what I know, which is that my friendships have made up the bulk of my life and have made up like the bulk of my identity and what I've learned over the course of my time and stuff. So to excise that or to set it aside makes no sense to me. It just doesn't. It is material that I use to work, basically. And I often find myself reaching for it to clarify things. I have a story coming out. I'm going to shove this out in case anyone's interested. There is the Scottish Book Trust has a newsletter, and they invited me to write a story for them that they would serialize in 7 parts over the course of National Book Week in Scotland. So I did, and I tried to and the theme of what they wanted to do was friendship, and I was like, I know something about that, I could write about that. And I did end up writing something that was about friendship that, I had been reaching for something different, and then, I was writing at a moment of, acute stress and difficulty, and just found myself thinking of my friends and how much they kind of give to me and how much we sustain each other. And realized I could build a story out of that, and did. So it is there. It is going to be in chunks and stuff. But I just think that it is something that I reach for to just realize how much it is structuring my life.
Because you don't only use friendship as a narrative force in opposition to a more traditional, ordinary conflict, but also the relations between your characters are not what we are used to. For example, love in your books is not romantic movie love. I mean, for example, in River we have a very clear true love, which is love between 2 sisters, which made me actually think of Frozen.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's true. I mean, in the end...
Frozen, this is a fun fact about Frozen. It's actually literally about me and my PhD. Yeah. I had to let it go. I did. I belted it out, my poor neighbors in Glasgow had to suffer through me singing that song a lot as I was leaving my PhD. But also, I sobbed my way through watching it twice in the theater, once with my husband and once with my sister, because we'd never actually seen, I had never gotten to see in a movie of that, caliber and so on, just the love between sisters being acknowledged as something that can break a curse, the true love that breaks curses and does things, yeah.
And also, both in Frozen, but especially in your novels, it's not a quest.
Yeah.
I mean, because in most romantic comedies, it's boy meets girl, boy has to do this and this and this and this, and then eventually he gets a girl, or whatever, some kind, or even worse, some kind of business.
Yeah.
And I know marriage is a contract.
Yes.
Which is about everything that's wrong with love in a society.
Yeah.
But in relationships and love in your stories do not work like that. Maybe it's a consequence of a certain queerness in your stories.
Yeah.
I mean, Red and Blue, for example, they have no fixed gender.
Yeah.
I mean, they are not male or female. They are not even beings. Sometimes they feel like they're objects.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is as queer as it gets. And or maybe is it the other way around? Maybe changing how you treat relationships makes your stories more queer.
That's a really interesting question. I definitely think that there is. I mean, necessarily for me, like writing and queerness are hand in hand because I am queer and because so much of my reading has been to kind of see what I can get against the grain of things. I think that is like one of the Sofia Samatar has this beautiful essay called, I think it's called Reading Queerly, 3 Snapshots. It's from like a decade ago at this point. But it looks at 3 different excerpts and just talks about like how she sees queerness at work in them when they are not necessarily about representing a same-sex relationship, right? And I do think that like an enormous part of queerness for me is like deconstructing the world, is like reading the world slant, reading it against its grain, seeing in the same way of like looking at a grammar, right? Of like, what are the rules? Why are the rules? How can we bend these rules? How can we live more authentically in between them or against them, or just build something different out of the material of them? And as it also happens, like I think a lot of the science fiction and fantasy communities that I like came up with and was part of were very interested in exploding norms and stuff, and queerness was part of that. So I think that asking why is kind of an inherently like provocative and challenging thing, even though it's born out of an interest and like an innocent curiosity a lot of the time. And I think the same curiosity that goes, why aren't there more friendships in fiction? Why aren't there more loving sisters in fiction? Like, why is my experience that I have had and that I know to be true and extant in the world, why does it not exist in fiction? And also, where is all this other stuff? Like, and I think that once you start asking that, all of the things that are not present start to mix together. In a similar way to how one finds solidarity with other people. I don't know, it's just, all of these things really feel like they just go hand in hand.
And also, sometimes the readers and the public do not accept this.
Yeah.
I mean, every time I hear somebody say that Frodo and Sam are actually lovers, as a straight man, it fucks me pretty a lot, because it's denying that 2 men may be friends. I mean, but I like what you said about questioning. I think there's nothing more queer, nothing queerer than questioning. And I think a lot of supposedly queer fiction fails to do this. Like in the end, it's just another boy meets girl, only now it's boy meets boy. But it's still this quest, and in the end they come together, and they are happily ever married and stuff. And I like how you question pretty much everything. I mean, with the story of John, for example, the second one in this edition, it's not clear what we should do morally. The witch, she has a certain position, which is not clear until the end, but she has. But the other female character, and I don't want to do a spoiler, that's why I'm talking like this. But she has a very different approach, and then we have John, and it's really difficult to say who's right. And I think you don't say it; you just give the question.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because it was really interesting writing that story. John Hollowback is a story that I started writing in 2009 or 2010, I think. And I was writing it at that time for a friend, for a male friend. in that like I was writing it like for him in a kind of like act of love, of just like wanting to, you know, give him a different perspective on himself. And then I didn't get very far in it. He ended up hurting me terribly. And the idea of like writing anything for him like just kind of flew out the window. And it just kind of languished for a very long time until basically Jonathan Strawn, who edited the Book of Witches anthology, asked me to write a witch story. And then I was like, oh, you know, I have that story that I started. And I pulled it up. And I realized that John was the villain of the story, and that I needed to, and that I was now writing it about a completely different person who had betrayed and hurt me terribly. And so something that was supposed to begin as a kind of like gift that I was giving to someone I cared about was now this sight of me wrestling with how much I despised a person and yet asking myself, like, what is the ethical thing that I would that I want from this ultimately? And like just so and the struggle of that was in there. Writing that story was so hard because I hated John so much. Like writing from the perspective of someone who you actually despise, for me, is difficult. I think other people perhaps have an easier time with it. You know, find a well. I think that there's a very good writerly path to finding a well of empathy within yourself for even the worst character. You know, it just wasn't there for me with this one. It was. I despised him so much. But I wanted to write him in a way that was honest and that would do a kind of justice to a situation. And I recently, this is so out of left field, but there is this, I'm sorry, something is stuck in my teeth and it's very distracting. I shouldn't have had walnuts right before getting on stage. Okay. There's a beautiful creative retreat called the Wayward Retreat, and that I have been to and I really love. And in their application form, which is the friendliest, kindest application form I've basically ever encountered. I hate paperwork, and I loved doing this. One of the questions that they ask is, tell us why you make art in 6 words? Which I think is a wonderful exercise that I would offer to anyone who makes art. And what I came up with for myself has turned into this like compass in me that I kind of reorient towards periodically. And what I said was, let me get this right, say true things and surprise myself. And I feel like that was a thing that was really at work here. It's like I wanted to speak to the truth of a situation in this story, but I wanted there to be room to question and scrutinize my own certainties, to allow there to be some space to be surprised, and to allow like myself to not calcify in my contempt for this shitty person who I truly despise and still never want to meet again. Fuck that guy. Anyway. But now I've written a story about him that other people can also say fuck that guy too. So.
And you get to understand him.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't condone his acts.
No.
But you understand from what point he's
Yes.
acting. I mean, nobody thinks he's the bad guy. I mean, fucking Hitler had dogs, and he was a vegetarian. I mean, I'm not going to kill a cow. 6 million Jews, well, whatever. But
Jesus Christ! I just found myself imagining those like the things that would play on a videotape that start with like, you wouldn't steal a car. It's like, you wouldn't kill a cow. But anyways, so it's terrible.
1 million gypsies.
Yeah. There are some things that like, I don't know, man. I really wrestle with, it's funny because that person I understood so thoroughly. Like, I completely understood everything that they did. And still representing that understanding felt viscerally nauseating. And I don't know, I think that meant that I was doing it correctly to some extent, but yeah, it was an embodied response. Anyways, please continue.
You often use binarism in your stories. I mean, obviously, red and blue is very clear, but now in River, for instance, you have two sisters, you have a family that looks in two directions, you have a river that flows from north to south until it flows from south to north.
Yeah.
And one of those suppositions is about grammar. The people from Thistleford is the name of
yeah.
Thistleford.
Is it called
they are
Cardena in the book? Is it? I just love that. I think I only learned that today, and I just thought it was beautiful.
Yeah, if we have time, I want to ask you about the translation.
Oh, sure.
Because poor Luis, who is somewhere around here, it's a really difficult word he had. Well, people in Thistleford, they are scholars. They try to and merchants, which I think it's very important. They try to tame grammar.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, we have the people we have Arcadia, which is a land of free grammar. So free that it's actually a mutant place. It's continually changing.
Yeah.
And even time doesn't work ordinarily. Is grammar poetry?
Yes. Yes, that's great. This is a very simple question I can answer. I think, yes. And what I mean specifically by that is that there's a way that the same way that I was talking about singing and speaking, that's actually a metaphor I use when I teach, when I'm trying to teach people to not be afraid of poetry. I ask them, what are some defining characteristics of poetry for you? Like, I'll have a classroom, a workshop, and I say, okay, here is a whiteboard. Tell me some things that define poetry for you so that you know it when you see it. And I will take the things that they say and I put them on the board, and there are things like metaphor, rhythm, alliteration, like other figures of speech and stuff like that. Sometimes they'll say rhyme, they'll say like ellipsis or elision, all of that sort of things. And then I collect all of these responses, I put them on the board, and then I play a terrible pedagogical trick, and I'm like, just so you know, all of these things that you've put on the board are also characteristics of prose. Every single one of them. Prose can have rhyme in it. Prose can have line breaks in it. Like, what's a paragraph break if not a line break? Prose can have huge elisions in it. There can be time skips. There can be Raymond Chandler writing, he had a gun, I took it from him. There's so much that you can compact in prose. So if that's the case, then what remains? What is the difference, actually? And this is all by way of saying to them that for me, the difference between poetry and prose is the difference between singing and speaking. It's that speaking is something that we use to communicate on one register, and singing does something very different to us. So that the experience of, even though you're using the same language, I could be saying the same thing to you, speaking it, but if I start to sing to you as I'm speaking to you, something else is going on, suddenly a weird thing happens. I have transformed you from someone who is having a conversation to me to an audience member who is listening to me sing, right? I have had to shift the quality of your attention, perhaps against your will. It can be very weird when someone starts to sing at you, right? Like, it can be very unsettling. So a transformation has occurred. And I think that even when, in our language, when we say, in Latinate languages, right, the word enchantment or enchanted is connected to encantata, to sing, right? And there's a moment in Lord of the Rings where Sam, when he's in Lothlorien, says it's like being in a song. It's like literally what the word enchanted means, is like you are in a song, right? So to me, grammar, there's a secret in The River Has Roots that is part of the world building that I did for it that did not make it onto the page, but that will absolutely be crucial to any further thing that I write in that world, which is that what physical grammar actually is, because grammar is both the word for magic and it's also a physical substance that flows down the River Liss. And what it physically is Arcadian tears. So when people in Arcadia weep, that flows into the water and it becomes this substance, this grammar. The only thing that makes Arcadians weep is human singing. So like I wanted there to be this engine of Arcadians are themselves like magic, change. They are these beings made of this inherent ability to transform. But human voices singing, they can't sing. Humans can sing. And the singing that humans do is something they're deeply vulnerable to. It's something that Arcadians are deeply vulnerable to. And so I wanted there to be this connection between singing and emotion and magic and grammar, and the idea that there are people who want to set shackles on this, who want to put this into a system and tame it, do other things with it, when there are other things like ballads that have just like a different grammar to them. Like I end the book by observing that there is the grammar of ballads and there's the grammar of textbooks and there's the grammar of like grammarians and stuff like that. And all of these are different approaches to both language and to magic. So yeah, I said it was a short answer and I lied. It was actually a long answer, hidden.
We have time for a question. If somebody is not shy, well...
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm going to put this in my ear.
Hola. Jo tenia una pregunta al voltant del riu té arrels, concretament, perquè veig que està com molt arrelat en el folklore anglosaxó a través de la cançó de les dues germanes. I m'ha cridat molt l'atenció com, en lloc d'agafar una sola versió, agafa les diverses versions de la tradició.
There are the different versions of the tradition and you make them all valid. You give validity to all of them with all of this weight. And you create your own version of the song without leaving the other ones behind. It's like you take this testimony and you make it yours. So I'm curious to know how this idea came about of taking the different versions of the song, creating your own in such a suggestive and lyrical world, not just in the shape, but in the content as well. And I mean, how did this idea come about? This idea of taking everything and not just creating your own version, but building upon what was already created, adding to it.
Okay, sorry. I was told that I would hear a translation in this, and
sorry,
it hasn't happened. And I'm not sure if it's because I dropped it and turned it off, or if something else is happening.
Well, anyway,
if you want to translate it for me, that would be great. I don't know if somebody wants to check this for me. I was very excited to hear this technology happen. But anyways, I'm so sorry. I was trying to, go for it.
In the river, you don't take the one version of the Anglo-Saxon tale, but you take different versions and you play with all of them in your own world.
Yes.
So just to make it very short, because otherwise you don't have time.
Sure. So actually, part of the reason it's like that is because the version that I first heard was Lorena McKennett's version, the Bonnie Swans. And that version is one that mixes a lot of different ones together. So the ballad of the cruel, or the type of ballad, the Cruel Sister, or the Trois Sisters, the Trois Corbies, no, not the Trois Corbies, Trois Sisters. There are lots of different elements in them. Sometimes, and the strange thing about Lorena McKennett's version is that she puts most of the elements together. It's like a composite of all of those different ones. But that was the first one that I encountered. So that was the one that was most foundational to me and that gave me the most elements I wanted to play with. But after that one, I actually heard lots of different versions and loved all of them. But I think because Lorena Mickenet's was first, it just kind of stayed there. The one that I listened to most recently before writing the book, though, which I highly recommend because it's beautiful, is by Emily Portman. And now I'm going to not remember exactly the title. It's on her album it's actually called The Glamoury, which sounds like grammar and is a little bit connected to it. It's a 2010 album. So the song on there that most looks like The Cruel Sister or whatever is the one that was so gorgeous that I just kept listening to it over and over and going, I have to write a story that goes against this because it's so beautiful, but I just disagree with it so hard. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. I'm so sorry I missed it. But yeah.
Talking about being sorry, I'm really, really sorry.
Oh, no,
it's time we have to leave. La Amal El-Mohtar estará ara.
And she will be now signing books. If you haven't read her books, I recommend them so much. If you have, then I don't need to recommend them to you. You know how good she is.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming.